Hello, I'm Claire from Cult Pens, and we're here today with Helen Colebrook, one of our collaborators and one of our influencers that we work with. You may also know the celebrated author Helen Colebrook as Journal with Purpose. And for those people who haven't come across Helen before, I'm going to hand over to Helen to introduce herself.
Hi there, thank you ever so much for having me. I'm Helen Colebrook, I'm from Devon, and as Claire said, I'm often known under the name of Journal with Purpose online. I love sharing my absolute passion for journaling, and I do that in lots of ways over on YouTube, on my blog and on Instagram, and it's just really one of the things that's made the biggest difference to my life, and I'm now just lucky enough to have 2 books published as well.
So it's very exciting. We're delighted you could join us, and we're just on the cusp of the book arriving. I think the stock is on its way to us now, your second book, which is really exciting. Going right back to the beginning, when and how did your journaling journey, if I'm allowed to use that word, when did your journaling journey start for you? How did it all come about?
I think it's one of those things. I've always kept lists and notes of things that have happened, and I think it's just probably about 6 years ago I really wanted to become a bit more intentional with that, so that I was doing it more often, because I think I'd often have scraps of bits of things lying everywhere. If I went on holiday, I'd write loads, stick in photos, those sorts of things, and I'd often write down things about everything I wanted to achieve and what I was working on, but it wasn't particularly structured. So I then started looking online, and I couldn't believe, I went onto Pinterest initially and saw that just thousands of people were taking photos of their journal pages and sharing them on Pinterest. And I was just blown away by that. And it gave me loads of ideas. I think it gave some structure to my thoughts and what I was already trying to do. So I started taking photos of my journal pages and set up an Instagram account, which I'd never done before. And I was just really, I guess, so surprised by how many people were interested in that. And that really spurred me on, actually, because in social media, it can be a bit hit and miss sometimes, but the journaling community are just phenomenal, and they get involved and they kind of support you on whatever you're working towards. And so I think that really just encouraged me to make sure that I was taking time for it every day, because I felt this sense of connection with other people. And I realised it was doing me so much good, because I think I'm one of those people that always has so many thoughts going around in my mind, and it can stop you actually doing things because you're just thinking all the time. And having somewhere to be able to write all of those thoughts down, kind of empty my brain a little bit, I found it just so beneficial that since that moment I haven't stopped, and I've written in my journals every single day since then.
Oh wow, I've got quite a lot of questions about that. So how long do you spend per day? Has that sort of changed over time?
So I would say a minimum amount of time I spend in my journals every day is about 15 minutes. And I do that every evening. So I have it as part of my little evening routine. Once we've had dinner and we're settled down, I get my journals out straight away, and I start writing down about what I got done that day, what I didn't, what worked well, what I'm really grateful for. And that's kind of my minimum commitment to myself, is that I'll spend 15 minutes writing, because it's just so important to me. If I've got more time, then I could spend hours doing it. If I've got, say, some free time at the weekend, I'll come and sit at my desk, get all of my stationery and art supplies out, and I could then happily spend a couple of hours adding all of the decorative elements and really just kind of processing everything that I'm thinking. But say 15 minutes is my minimum commitment to myself every day.
That feels achievable as well for someone starting out. It doesn't feel like too daunting an amount of time. So I've been thinking about starting journaling and been doing a bit of reading, and started with the Ryder Carroll book, which is quite functional and structural and organised, but the pages that you do are beautiful and very ornate. So have you always had that decorative element to your journaling, and how has that changed, or has it changed over time? Has that always been part of it for you?
Until I looked online, I didn't add any decorative elements to my journals. They were all just handwritten. And when I saw on Pinterest what people were doing, it really inspired me, because I'm somebody that hadn't done anything particularly creative, not on paper, for many, many years. I did bits of sewing and things like that, but I hadn't drawn, painted, done anything like that probably since I was at school. So, but it's seeing other people doing that, I thought that looks just incredible. But I've always been quite intimidated by sketchbooks. I've bought them in the past, done one sketch in the front, not been happy with it, and it's just stayed there. But in your journal, it doesn't actually matter if it's perfect, because if you're drawing something that maybe represents something you've seen when you've been out that day, maybe a leaf, a flower, something like that, as long as it ties into your memory and helps take you back to that place, it doesn't actually matter whether it looks exactly like what you were trying to sketch. So I think because it took all the pressure off of me, it encouraged me to just do it, because I thought, it doesn't matter, it's just my journal. And from there, I've just added more and more illustrations, bought my first watercolour set, got into brush lettering, did all of those things which I never dreamt of at all as being part of journaling. But for me now, that creative element is partly what quietens my mind and enables me to sit down and then really think. And I just love adding all of those elements.
That's amazing. I find the colouring part quite daunting, because I think what you do is amazing, and I really that really chimes with me. That just haven't done anything since school. What kind of want to start but don't know where to. So that's fantastic. And you touched on it a little bit. It's perhaps the big question, but what kind of impact has journaling, that daily ritual, had on your life?
It's been immense, really, because I think we're so busy now, I think, all of the time, and with everything digital, which is amazing, enabling us to connect, it's also really hard for us to switch off. So you've always got notifications coming through on your laptop, on your phone, wherever you are, people are contacting you. And when I journal, that's my time to turn off all notifications. I don't look at anything digital. And that's my time to actually think, not just about what I've got to get done, what I didn't get done, but the things that I really want to do with my life. And I don't think I'd ever really done that before I started journaling regularly. Each day you wake up and you've got a mountain of emails and things waiting for you, commitments, things you need to do for your family. But I actually then started taking time to think, what do I want to do? What do I want to get out of life? And I'd create collage pages in my journal with images of things that I wanted to do. I remember about 4 years ago, I stuck in a photo of like a #1 best-selling author. And that was before I had any kind of really big social media following. I wasn't in contact with anybody. I didn't even really know anything about that process. It was just something, God, that'd be really amazing to do one day. And because that's there, I think you then start focusing on those things that you want to do. So I then use my journal to prioritise a bit of time for me every day, where I'm working on, I guess you could call it like a passion project of some kind. So something that's really important to me, isn't something that somebody else is expecting from me. And that's changed so many areas of my life, things that I'm now actually getting a chance to kind of discover a bit more. And I feel I've just grown immensely, really, through using my journal.
Wow, that's amazing. I love the book, the published author reference. That's incredible that was there back in the early days of your journaling experience. That's brilliant. Did you, I guess when you're starting, were there particular influences online or books that you read, or things that were kind of a bit of a moment for you that helped kind of kickstart your journey?
I certainly spent quite a lot of time in the early days looking at the bulletjournal.com website. So that was long before Ryder Carroll's book was out. There was another really big influencer at the time. She's not very active now. She was Cara from Bohoberry. And she was one of the first people I saw that took the bullet journal system, which, as you mentioned, is really functional. It's about kind of organising your thoughts, and she added a creative element on top. And that was one of the first people that really inspired me to go down more of the creative journaling line. And she was starting to do more things with lettering and just adding little doodles or mandalas. So I think that's probably what really sparked me then going in the direction of creative journaling, because as soon as I added that first little tiny flower doodle on my journal page, I just thought, this is great. I drew something then, which I've not done in years. So yeah, and from there, then lots and lots of people, the whole kind of bullet journal movement from people using that hashtag just grew and grew. And there's just hundreds of, well, thousands and thousands of people just sharing amazing pages online.
And what trends have you seen over the years? So you talk about it started decoratively, and I know the whole movement has evolved. So what have you seen that's changed over the years, and what do you see coming through at the moment that might be new in the journaling world?
So I think it's quite interesting when you see people first start out journaling and perhaps they lack confidence, and they'll post something about the fact, oh, I'm really sorry, my drawings aren't very good, or my lettering's not very good. And I think people in the journaling community are really quick to say it doesn't matter, because this is your journal, it's brilliant that you're sharing it and getting some joy from actually doing it. And then you see people gradually over time start to pick up another skill. They might add something a little bit more intricate in one of their doodles that they've added, or they'll then get some brush pens and start adding some more lettering. And I think the journals have got more and more creative over time, which I think could, for somebody starting out, if you look at all of that, that could actually be quite intimidating if you think you can't do all of those things. So I always encourage people to just start with something quite simple and small, because there's loads of ways to add creative elements to your journals. Things like stamps, stickers, washi tapes, pattern papers, taking photos and putting them in. And I think probably one thing I've noticed a lot over the last year is people taking the time to document all of the little things in life, because that's predominantly what we've all been focusing on. And people taking a lot of time to kind of document bits that they're doing perhaps with their children at home, but also writing down favourite recipes that they've tried and maybe illustrating them, or adding photographs that they've taken of their meals or craft products they've been working on with their children, or perhaps something they've seen on their walks. And people seem to be documenting more of life in a creative form, because I think they've had more time to stop and think, and all those little things have become really big for us to appreciate. You know, new flowers coming out, the changing seasons, and people are using their journals to reflect that, whether it's predominantly writing, but a lot of them getting really creative with the kinds of supplies they're using and how they're documenting all of this in their journals.
So you talk about some products to get started with. I think I have to mention the filing and the boxes behind you as your backdrop today, because I'm itching to open and have a rummage around in there. Talk us a little bit about the organisation that's going on behind us, because that looks fantastic, and also a bit about some of your favourite products, some of the things that if someone's just starting out, have a go with this or start here, what would your suggestions be?
Okay, so behind me, I'm lucky enough to just have tons and tons of supplies. I get sent lots, which is amazing, but also these are things that have built up now over the years. So I've got all kinds of pens, watercolour paints, patterned papers. I've got boxes behind me full of things that I collect when we used to be able to go out a bit more. So if I picked up leaflets, napkins, receipts, they can all make brilliant decorations for your journal pages. So I've got tons of those kinds of things behind me: acrylic paints, glue, gouache, you name it. I've probably got a bit of everything there. For starting out, I would recommend you definitely want something like a black pigment liner. So I use the Sakura pigment liners a lot, something that's waterproof, so that if you do want to add anything wet over the top, like watercolor pencils, anything like that, you know it's not going to smudge, they're great for writing and sketching, but even if you just spill a little bit of something on there, like some water, you know it's not going to run. So I definitely recommend something like that. Brush pens I love because they're a great way of adding some bold headings to your page, making something stand out. And I love the Tombow range. The ABT brush pens are great. The one I use the most is the Tombow Fudenosuke brush pen with the firm nib. And it's also the one I often recommend starting with because it's got a much smaller nib. So it's a bit easier to control than some of the big ones. And then washi tape. I have tons of washi tape and I love it. Great for adding simple decorations to the edge of your pages. Also, if you want to stick in a photograph or a receipt, the washi tape's great for that. If you want to add in little tipping cards, as they call, where they open out on your journal pages, some strips of washi tape for that. So yeah, those would probably be the three things I would say I would never want to be without.
I mean, I love that list, and obviously we've got lots of those products at Cult Pens, but I also love the idea of the everyday objects and just keeping a receipt or a napkin or something from when you're out and about. That's fantastic because that's something really easy and accessible for everybody, and it doesn't require any investment or any cost. Just that sense of collection as you move through your life is a really lovely idea, and lending itself to this kind of scrapbooking feel of a scrapbook as well as the journal. So I love that. That's fantastic.
Something which has really taken off, it's called junk journaling, and it's where you use predominantly things you would throw away to create your journal. So I make them and I sew them in the spine, so that can be things like newspapers, magazine pages, old book pages, envelopes, and you actually sew those together to form the basis of your journal. And you can use wrapping paper, anything, and it's another really good way to kind of appreciate the things that maybe get put through your letterbox that you'd normally get rid of, or when you are out and about, to collect those things and actually turn them into something really special.
That's fantastic. Now, you're very humble because I think there are two other products that anyone starting out in journaling probably needs, which are your two books.
Hey.
So talk to us a little bit about, we'll talk about each book and what the difference is between the two, but how did you come to publish your first book? Because I'm sure we've got lots of people who'll be, that sense of everyone has a book in them, and you had a bit of that yourself. You referenced that earlier. How did the publishing of the first book come about?
So I mentioned that I'd put in my sort of vision board pages that I wanted to do a book at some point, and it was probably about 2 years after I did that where I'd started to get a really good size following on social media, and people had asked me whether I did videos, whether I had blog posts, and so that led to me then setting up a YouTube channel, setting up a blog, which weren't things I'd ever intended doing when I started sharing my journal pages online. But I then started to get to the point where I had a good size following, and I thought, yeah, actually, I really would like to do a book related to journaling. And I had no idea where to start. I knew nothing about the publishing process. And I remember one Sunday afternoon, I just got my laptop out and thought, I'll just have a look at some publishers and see if there's any that look suitable. And as I went through them, I quickly realised that none of them were taking direct submissions from people wanting to do books, that you had to have an agent. And I was completely naive to all of this. So then I started looking through lists of agents in the non-fiction section, and particularly ones that were focusing on things quite creative. I found a couple that I really liked the look of, and I followed them on Instagram. And on that very same Sunday, one of the agents messaged me back on Instagram saying, was I interested in doing a book on journaling? And so I replied saying, yes, absolutely, I'd love to. And she said, great, let's set up a call for next week. And I have to say at that point, I was immediately suspicious, because that doesn't happen. Surely you don't just follow somebody and they offer you that.
Yeah.
But I looked at the agent and I looked at her credentials, and she was, from everything I could tell, completely legitimate. And we set up a call and we worked together for many weeks before she would even take me on, so to sign a contract with her to be my agent, to sort of put together some proposals and thoughts, because I didn't have any ideas at that time. And so then we signed contracts, and then she put out my ideas to lots and lots of publishers. And the feedback from all of them was really, really positive, but they didn't know often whether there was enough kind of demand in the market, that especially that wasn't already being met by some of the journaling books that are out there. And then one came back saying, yes, they'd be really interested. Yes, they'd love to meet with me. And as it happens, they're in Devon too, which is phenomenal.
Always all about Devon. Brilliant.
But the idea they had was completely different to the one that I put forwards, but they're interested in working with me. So I met with them, and they talked to me about this idea they had where they wanted to look more at kind of the design elements behind journaling, because they felt that would be great for a wider market and to encourage people into the world of journaling, which is where the first book with all of the doodles and designs and things like that came from. So I then sort of took their idea, made it into my own, looked at what I already use in my journals, because one of the things I see people do a lot with, particularly in bullet journaling, is they want a theme to start each month. So it might be florals or leaves, or it might be something to do with summer, autumn, and people are always after theme ideas. So I then thought, well, this could be really good actually if we break it into lots of different themes, so people have always got some ideas that they can use for their journal. And that was where that first book came about from. And I'm still happily with the same agent and publisher, and obviously have now moved on to the second book.
So talk to us about the second book and the difference to the first, and what we're going to have a little sneak preview.
Hey, it's there.
Fantastic. Excellent.
So the second book is very similar to the first proposal I put together with my agent. And for me, it's the book I wish had been there when I first started doing journaling on a daily basis, because there's tons of ideas on Pinterest and Instagram, but it's easy to kind of lose them once you've seen them on social media. And also, a lot of people like me like to be away from their digital devices when they're doing things in their journal, so that they're not distracted. So this book for me is kind of everything that I would have wanted when I started. It's loads of layout ideas for your journals, for how you might want to lay your pages out. Loads of writing prompts, because one of the things I often get asked is, I want to keep a journal, but I don't know what to write about. Particularly if days feel quite similar, you're doing lots of the same things, what do you find to write about? And I think there's tons of things. So there's loads of journaling prompts in there to hopefully just make you start thinking about things in a slightly different way, and loads of creative ideas as well. So how you can incorporate some of those creative elements from the first book and use those in your journals, but perhaps with different supplies. So it could be pencils, pens, watercolors, gouache, acrylic paint, whatever your kind of medium is you like to use, to actually be able to bring those things into your journals to add some more creativity to it.
Fantastic. So would you suggest people start with the new book for any beginners, and then once they get going and they've got the layout and they've used some of your prompts, they then move on to the first book to get some more theme inspiration? That'd be a right kind of order, or not?
I don't think it really matters. I think it probably depends more what you're looking for. If you're already really happy with how you lay your journals out, and you've got loads of things you already want to write about, but you want to add some more decorative elements, probably the first book's going to really help you with that. But if you're either newer to journaling or have been doing it for a while and looking for some more ideas, then I'd say the newer book's the one to go for.
You've mentioned a couple of times the last year or so, and obviously it's been very challenging for everybody in all kinds of ways. How has journaling helped you through some of the challenges?
One of the things I focus on a lot in my journal is gratitude. So I always have a gratitude page, and I think that's helped me immensely, even more so during the last year, because obviously it's been tough for everybody, but what I've made sure is that every day I've taken some time out to note down the things that I'm grateful for. And that makes a huge difference to where your mind wanders when you're sat there thinking about all the things you can't do. But actually, if you can see and hear the birds outside in the garden, or you can see nature changing, or over the last year I've spent more time with my daughter than I should have been able to, because she should have been away at university. So I spent time doing things like baking with her. I've had time to read some great books and watch things that I never would have watched before. And so I've taken time to actually make sure that I'm writing down about those things. And that's it can feel a bit fake when you first start doing it, because you're actually missing all those other things. But over time, it encourages you, even during the day, to start looking out for things that you're going to be able to write down that you're grateful for. So maybe a quick conversation with somebody you've passed on the street, watching something that's made you laugh and feel good. I think that's just been so helpful for me, especially over the last year.
Fantastic. I think the mindfulness, stop and consider, has a really positive impact, and that pause for thought, certainly. Do you think, again, a bit of a big question, but do you think that journaling then has the potential to have a real positive impact on people's mental health?
Oh, definitely. And I've done an online class about journaling for positivity, and there's a few things that I do in there along with the gratitude. Is each month I have a page set up called I'm proud of myself for, and in there every night I write a line of things that I'm really happy that I've done, because I think it's so easy to kind of beat ourselves up and think about the things that we haven't got done, maybe things we regret doing. But writing that down and actually saying, no, I did some good things today. I showed up and I got some things done, and I cooked a meal for my family, or I managed to reply to a load of emails, particularly when the last year has been so hard. Taking that time to recognise the good things you did, I think puts you in a much better state of mind. And I also did a YouTube video recently which people have responded really well to, and that was called Dealing with Negative Thoughts, and use one of the journal pages to write all of those things out. So it could be the things you're worried about, the things you're angry about, the bad things you tell yourself about yourself, and write them all down, but then cover them up with things like, it could be decorative paper or acrylic paints, and then put some positive things down on top. So using your journal to get all of that stuff out rather than have it swimming around in your mind, but then try and turn your mind back into a more positive place, and actually often a more realistic place of looking at it from afar and thinking, no, let's start looking for some sort of positivity here. So yeah, I think it can be really, really helpful. It's much better than having it swimming in your head. And maybe you don't want to keep having those same conversations with people, particularly if it's something that can't be fixed, it's just something you're worrying about. Just getting it all out on paper is so helpful.
I think that I think lots of people will relate to that, and that negative thought cycle that I think is the part of the human condition, but getting it out, I think, is often one of the most helpful things. That's fantastic, thank you. So 2 books published, lots of followers on social, classes on journaling. What is next? So what little things have you perhaps snuck into your journal, hopes and aspirations for the future that you think are going to come true, or you're hoping, or you're working on? What might we see next from Helen?
Well, I'm always looking for new creative things to bring into my journaling. So I'm probably trying to look more at ways of adding new techniques that people are excited to try out in their journals. Whether I've got a 3rd book in me, who knows, but perhaps looking at some more of the creative elements and techniques. So I just spent a couple of hours earlier this week filming something that people can do with ink pads and different ways they can use them. I think people often build up quite a lot of supplies, so I like to find ways to show people lots of different ways to use them to make sure they're getting really good value from them. So probably a lot more kind of the technique stuff. Loads more online classes. I love doing those because it doesn't matter what's happening in the outside world, people can still access those, and I think it's just so useful for people to have that outlet. I've been doing more of sharing kind of mini projects, things people can do really quickly, like creating their own mini journal zines, which are only about this kind of size for them to be able to document bits in their life. So at the moment, I think I'm still at that point of, I'm actually not sure what's next. I'm going to carry on doing what I'm doing and see where it takes me.
So you mentioned online classes, Helen, you're really enjoying doing those. So you've got one coming up that you're doing with us, which is really exciting. So we're going to be doing a course on the 31st of March at 6 p.m. and you're going to be doing an introduction to journaling session for us live, which is very exciting. Thank you very much for doing that. Well, wishing you all the very best of luck with the new book. I'm sure it's going to be as fantastic as the first, if not even better. And we look forward to continuing working with you and seeing exactly what comes next.
Thank you ever so much.